I stayed on at Stanford after graduating I've taught for most of the past 25 years at the School of Medicine, teaching wellness and meditation and happiness and poetry and things that are hard to believe that Stanford would pay for. And I remember the first time, it was in 2009 that my teaching partner and I started the happiness class at Stanford. And I remember first about how difficult it was to get any department to let us be within 100 miles of their class offerings, offering something on happiness. I remember like the psychology department saying, well, what does happiness have to do with psychology? And the home bio department and the School of Education, well, we can't foster anything like that. And the director of Vaden at that time said, well, wait a second, I think this is good for our students, so I will simply use my name as like a full professor in the medical school. So we offered, believe it or not, the happiness class out of the Department of Pediatrics for its first like X number of years on the campus, because that was the only place that would take us. But the first class, I remember this clearly, just how peculiar it was to be asking, you know, kind of hyperactive 18 and 19-year-olds to like sit still and contemplate the bounty and blessing of their life. To actually sit still and reflect upon how unbelievably lucky they are to be at Stanford University. To not just be in the future with what this education will bring, but to bring it in. You know, to sit with, like, how the heck is it possible in a world of 7 billion people that I got lucky enough to be sitting in this room at this time at this school? So one of the first practices that we did and do to remind people of how lucky they are to be at Stanford is we send them outside to take a walk for a little bit around campus and appreciate the natural beauty of the environment. Like that's an actual class exercise. Like, get up, put your phone down, apologize to your phone for leaving it, tell your phone you promise you'll be back, and then go outside quietly and reflect on just how beautiful it is. Not how much you have to do, not how important you are, not what you're going to do in the future, not all of the need-based drives that we have that dominate us, but a simple, quiet walk reflecting upon what it feels like for the breeze to hit your arm here in Northern California, or how direct and gorgeous the sun is, and just enjoy. You know, enjoy for a few minutes the gift of this. So the first time we did this, we sent them out for like, I don't know, 10 minutes, thinking how many of them are going to come back, you know, it's like, how, you know, and what are they going to say? So when they came back, we kidded with them and said, you know, if any of you speak to your parents tonight, like the likelihood is if they say, so what'd you do in school today? And you tell them that some teacher sent you outside to stare at trees, they may be a little concerned about where their tuition dollars are going. And yet, as I've gotten more into this question of happiness, I'm struck more and more deeply about that's probably one of the handful of few actual questions that might really matter to us. How do we become happy? Like, how do we take this gift of our life, this short, confusing, mysterious gift, and how do we live it in a way that we can say, with most of it, thank you? You know, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for the experiences. Thank you at some very deep level for the capacity to learn how it is we navigate this place. And thank you for the intelligence, aspiration, whatever it is, to try to figure it out. Thank you. But most of us don't do this. Most of the students here don't do this. Most of the adults here don't do this. Most people don't do this. They don't take just this staggering mystery question like, what is life? What are we here for? What can we do here to make it meaningful? They don't bring that in deeply enough. And so if you don't bring that question in deeply enough, it's very hard to say thank you for the opportunity to try to live that answer. You know, what is this life for? And why am I here? And what was I created to do? You know, I think being a kind of late 60s, early 70s hippie, I think all the time about Abraham Maslow's pyramid. And I now teach like another generation of students that simple, elegant description of what are we here for? Like, what is it that motivates us? And it's as relevant today as it was when I first discovered it, maybe in 1970 in a high school psychology class, as to like how much of our time do we want to spend at the bottom of that pyramid? Like one of the great, I'm going to say, failures of Stanford students, more than I would like to see, is in their determination and their drive and their like massive amount of energy they spend getting to this school. They've lost some of their wonder and some of their curiosity about, okay, yes, I can be successful, I can become a physician, or I can make a lot of money in business, or whatever I can do. But why? And what's the benefit, and to whom? Well, we're all struggling with that. You know, we're all in enough of a hurry. We're all affluent, at least the people in a room like this, we're all affluent enough not to have to worry about many things. But we haven't thought deeply enough about life to recognize the necessity of climbing that pyramid in terms of what it is we wake up to in the morning. You know, and the most brilliant part of Maslow's work is the part that's probably least known. So most of you learned, probably in high school, and then in a Psych 1 class in college, of the pyramid. You know, that at the bottom level of the pyramid is first safety needs. So food, clothing, shelter, sex, whatever the most basic needs are. That's the strongest motivation that human beings have. Then right above, those are the survival needs, right above that are the safety needs, such as, okay, I have food now, how do I make sure I'll have it tomorrow, or next week, or next month? I have a roof over my head, But how do I make sure that roof will be there in a month or 6 months or a year? So that's survival and safety needs. The two brilliant things that Maslow elucidated about happiness were, no matter how well, no matter how often, no matter how deeply you meet those needs, they will never make you happy. That is such a powerful challenge to almost any culture that exists on this earth. That no matter how well you survive, and no matter how safe you are, that in and of itself will never make you happy. That just sets the conditions for which you can begin to actually explore happiness. And I want to make that abundantly clear that most of the time, survival and safety are necessities for going up the ladder to actually confront happiness. But our world has conflated survival and safety with happiness. That we have been taught, and almost all of us have bought the Kool-Aid, that surviving, making sure that you and the people you love survive, is an ultimate value rather than just a necessary step for the actual deeper truths to emerge. Then, being safe, which is also absolutely essential. So having money in the bank, having physical health, having enough possessions, having enough entertainment, having enough protection against the elements. That too is necessary for happiness, but only as a precondition. Having money in the bank, taking a vacation to France instead of Monterey, those don't contribute to happiness. What they do is they're buffers against anxiety, and they're buffers against the existential angst and anomie that paralyze people. And we're taught very deeply and very strongly all over the place that those safety needs, like having, 10 times what you need in the bank, or earning 20 times more than the people at the bottom of the food chain, somehow that will make you happier. Starting with Maslow, and 25 years of research show that it's not so. It's not that having more and being able to vacation in France or Bali make you less happy. They just make nothing to do with whether you're happy. They're epiphenomenon for happiness. But the thing that Maslow distinguished, which is so powerful, besides the fact that safety and survival are not happiness, is he postulated, and this is not taught to most undergraduates, is that we actually have two separate need pathways. We have deficit needs and something he refers to as meta needs. We have deficit needs such as, on the whole practice of his pyramid, the deficit needs are, I need to survive. I need to have shelter and food and everything else. I need that because I don't have enough. I need safety because I'm not safe enough. I need relationships because I'm lonely. I need esteem because I'm empty. I need beauty to fill my space. But what he postulated that's just so powerful is that human beings have meta needs or sufficiency needs as well as deficit needs. And this is where you start getting sketchy with most dominant cultures, which are teaching us how to meet our deficit needs through the vehicle of the culture. But the meta needs are different. The meta needs are, I need to be the kind of person that other people get comfort from. That's a meta relationship need. I need to be stable so other people can depend on me. I need to create relationships in this world so I can give. Those are meta relationship needs. There are esteem needs, such as, I feel great that I was given an award because it recognizes my good work, so I feel better about me. That's a wonderful deficit esteem need, but we have meta needs, which is to feel good because we've simply helped, because we've added a little more beauty to this world, that we have made a contribution, or that we have grown in a way that is beneficent, is generous, not arising out of deficit. We also have what Maslow called like beauty, understanding, knowledge, a whole ethereal set of needs, which is you can read and learn and study to gain something, which is graduate school, which is great. But you can read and learn and study to become in awe of this world we inhabit, which is a meta need. The deficit need is absolutely essential, but happiness more emerges when we're able to touch the meta part of the need as well. So learning, because learning is fantastic. Going to a museum or climbing a mountain, not just to say you've been there, like the kind of tourist thing. Yeah, I've been to the Louvre, I've climbed Everest. That's a deficit need. A meta need is, I go because it gives me a chance to touch the unbelievably profound beauty that human beings and this earth have created. And it's not about nourishing the separate me, it's about opening up to a bigger something that I'm a part of, and I feel most full when I recognize the absolute remarkable experience that I'm entitled to visit for a while. And Maslow postulates that the last need, or self-actualization, is an arising from a place where you've touched each of the needs below it. And the wonderful thing about self-actualization from Maslow is it's not that there's a predetermined end point. It's that each one of us has a distinct and unique path through this life that nobody else has. And the self-actualized drive, which is what pushes all the other drives, is to try to take this life to figure out what your unique contribution to it is. For some people, it's relationship. For some people, it's learning. For some people, it's esteem, it's that giving esteem. For some people, it's creating safety. It's not the same for each of us. But the brilliance of Maslow was that he mentioned, even in the 60s, that the handful of people who get to that self-actualized place, they are mostly acultural. They step out of the majority of the people in their culture because they take the risk to march to their own drum. But he was very clear in understanding that they weren't anti-cultural, they weren't rebellious, and they weren't hostile. They were inner-directed. And that they knew they couldn't do what everybody else did or what the baseline was, because that would inhibit their ability to live the one, as Mary Oliver said, what the one wild and precious life that we all have. What are we going to do with that? So when I have been teaching happiness classes here and giving talks all over the place on it, the basic orientation is that question. Like, what am I going to do? What are any of us going to do with our one wild and precious life? And that's a very hard question to answer. It's made even more difficult when all of us don't know the research on what it is that makes people happy. So the great thing about teaching happiness classes now is that there finally is some research. When we started, there was less, and 20 years ago there was very little, and now there's some. And the essence of the research on happiness is that it depends mostly on three things. One, that you focus more on people than things. That you focus more on people than money. And that you focus more on people even than acquiring. Now, what that means for most people is that they do their things or acquiring with other people. So they have found that in cultures that have family and shared meals, the act of actually sharing the meal and, family style leads to an increase in happiness for everybody who's a part of that. So it's not that you just have to do people, but we have a business ethic which has instructed most of us to feel that our economic lives are way more important than our interpersonal lives. That it makes sense to sacrifice people for economics. That it makes sense to sacrifice people for the value of buying things and having material rewards, because we have been taught that things and status, which are wonderful, are mediators to happiness. That when we have enough things and when we have enough influence, then we'll be happy. We're taught that it's a mediator. The problem is that if you practice unhappiness while you're going towards the mediator, so like if you work too much, or you ignore your kids because you're too busy, then you are practicing qualities that train your brain in patterns of unhappiness. It's a very challenging dialectic. But the key finding is that at the end of your days, and they've come at this from two things. One, over the last 20 or 30 years, they've interviewed many, many, many dying people, people in hospice, people with terminal illnesses, and some of you have seen that, where they have asked people, what are your regrets? And you know the colloquial thing is that nobody wished they had spent more time at the office. But when they asked people what their regrets were, people who were dying or at the end or in hospice, they mentioned a few things. One, they mentioned I didn't have enough fun. Two, they mentioned that I had lost track of my friends, that I got too busy and I got too distracted, and many of my precious friends drifted away. And three, they wished that they had spent a little more energy and time giving to their families. Giving. A Maslow meta need. Giving to their families. Those were the top three. Having more fun, not losing track of friends, and giving more within the family. The other data point that is reaching that in a similar way, and many of you, because this is the Stanford reunion, so you're all well educated and smart, is many of you have seen either the TED Talk or the data on that 80-year Harvard study that they began in the 30s. And they followed 2 years of Harvard sophomores for their lives. And then the Harvard people were so engaged in the study that they followed their children and their grandchildren, so they now have 80 years worth of data. And as successful as Harvard people were and are, as much as they accomplished, the 2 times that they have fully analyzed the data and revealed it publicly. Back in the 70s, the first time that this data was discussed, the psychiatrist who revealed the data was somewhat, like he didn't know what to do with it because it was Harvard. And he had trouble explaining culturally. He wrote a book, but he had trouble explaining culturally that in the school that had the highest rates of success, cultural and material success for the United States, the element that most was aligned with happiness was relationship. How happy were you with your relationships? How much time did you spend with your relationships? Was it a reciprocal giving of relationship? That contributed more. They re-edited or followed the cohort for another 40 years. And just recently, in about 2015, they had another, social unveiling of this. And this time, the psychiatrist, because he already had the original data of relationship, this time he was even more both specific and chagrined, because the data showed that the 1.5 or 2 qualities that most predicted happiness were the ability to give and receive love. And that's quite telling. That, from convergent data, relationships and love appear to be the underpinning of what a happy and successful life actually is. One of the things that I read years ago, and since I do teach here, and I have some of that professor kind of interest, which is I love finding silly streams of studies that have no meaning and just remember them to be able to say at talks, because studies contradict each other, they're small. But I remember one study from not that long ago, which was looking at business success, and it was only looking at men. And maybe this is 15 years ago, I can't remember. But they were trying to figure out, and this is why science is both wonderful and ludicrous, they tried to figure out if getting a promotion at work led men to want to have more sex. Did it make them feel more studly? Did it throw testosterone? now that they were the king of the heap? And the answer was yes for about 3 weeks. And then they went back to the same old guy that they were, but they took married men, so they had a reliable sexual partner, and they just wanted to see, did getting a promotion at work lead them to more, whatever, macho, testosterone? And it lasted 3 weeks. And then the human tendency to take for granted what you have took over. The human tendency to normalize and stabilize and become inured to what you have took over. Our brains are wired so that about 85% of our neuronal connections are designed for stability. About 15% are designed for newness. So the 85% is to make sure you go to work, you do what you're supposed to do every day. You don't have to sit there thinking about, what do I do with the pencil? Do I sharpen it or stick it in my ear? You know what to do with the pencil because the majority of your brain is designed for stability and a kind of homeostatic experience, right? You have 15% of your brain, which gets a lot of play now, is neuroplasticity. You do. You have a part of your brain that can learn, adapt, and change. But that part of your brain is designed to be 15%. It's not designed because you'd go crazy if you responded to all new situations and stimuli without a stable pattern underneath it. The problem is that 80 or 85% makes us miss much of our life. It makes us take for granted much of our life. It disallows us the capacity to sit as these Stanford students sit and not recognize how unbelievably lucky we are. It forces us to not acknowledge that being able to sit in a room like this with your body comfortably breathing, with your mind functioning, is an unbelievably gift that will end. The 85% has us take stuff in the best way for granted. But to be happy, you have to keep some edge on that. Unfortunately, most of us use the cell phone as that edge. That we use that to satisfy the part of us that goes for newness and stimulation and easily grasped interest, instead of going deeper and looking at what is it that we really want to grow, how is it that we really want to unfold in our lives, and how is it at a minimum we can be not just happy, but content with what we have and not take it for granted. So happiness is a couple of different streams. It's the pyramid thing of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's a present-centered kind of awareness of what am I doing? What are my values? And what is it about my life right this moment that's rich and important? So I want to do a few practices because if I just yak for an hour, it doesn't get in. But I want to do a couple practices with you with my time that will help you understand, one, what happiness is. It's a present-centered experience on an appropriate path towards greater wholeness and growth. That would be my encapsulation of it. It's a positive, present-centered experience and appreciation of you being on your appropriate road to your own self-actualization. That sounds really fancy. That, unfortunately, that's one of the costs of teaching at Stanford. You don't sound like a normal human being. But it's this and this. And the link of this, before I ask you to do some practices, which is the theme of the talk that I offer to give, is the relationship between happiness and stress. Albert Schweitzer gave the best definition of happiness that I've ever seen. It's wanting what you have. This is a brilliant man. Of course, he didn't teach at Stanford because he would have turned that into a 4-paragraph thing. Because it had to be published, you know, like all that nonsense. Wanting what you have, which is only in the present, which is only now. Wanting what you have, wanting who you are, loving who you're with as best you can, being happy. What my tiny little contribution to that is, I added, and stress occurs when you want anything else but what you have. That's what stress is. You need stress. You can't just stay at comfortable and homeostatic. You need stress. You need to strive. You need to grow. You need to argue with your environment. You need to create change. You need to problem solve. The problem is most of us have too much stress and not enough wanting what we have. In fact, many of us believe that if we want what we have, we're going backwards. That's such a mistaken experience, because that's the only time that you're happy, is wanting what you have within a framework of growth towards self-actualization. Happiness is wanting what you have. Stress is wanting something else. We need stress. Here's the other problem, and then I'm going to give you the couple of practices. In our current culture of hurrying everywhere, of always being in a rush, your brain, under the quality of hurry, is simply stressed. You might say, I'm in a hurry. Your brain and nervous system take it as you're in danger. Because the only reason you wouldn't be enjoying your life is because there's danger. That's how your nervous system interprets it. Like, why would this person be rushing around when it's a beautiful day and there's people they love? Okay, there's got to be something really wrong here. Rushing and multitasking are signs to your nervous system that things are not okay. So when you're on your phone and doing something else, which we all are, our nervous system takes it as if we're in a difficult situation for us, and that it releases adrenaline to help us handle the conflict and the stress. It's one of the reasons why you see so few people looking genuinely content. Because very few of us are not rushing or multitasking. And when you're rushing and multitasking, it's impossible to say, I'm happy with what I have. Because those are both signs of not being happy with what you have, because you wouldn't be doing that. So the challenge is to find moments of practice where you're happy with what you have. So I'm going to give you one of those moments of practice. If you'd all please close your eyes. And sit comfortably for a moment. very gently relax your breathing. And allow yourself to enter the mind-body experience where you could even begin to be happy, which means you're quieter. You want your breathing to relax and stabilize, which doesn't mean you can't be doing things. We're just doing this as a practice. But you want to quiet and slow your breathing. And you want to gentle your breathing, make it gentler. This is because your nervous system's basic, omnipresent question is, are you safe? And if your nervous system can't answer that you're safe, you can't be happy. So when your belly relaxes and your breathing deepens, then your mind can start to entertain positive, loving, beauty-based thoughts because your nervous system is in a safe mode. So you want to practice maybe 2 or 3 slow, deep breaths where your nervous system is relaxed and gentle. And then you want to bring an image to your mind of someone you dearly love. You want to bring an image to your mind of someone you dearly love, and you want to try to hold that image in a way that you feel the love you have. And you want to relax into that open-hearted sense of fullness. And just for a moment, remember why this would be, the more you can experience this, would be the closer you get to a successful life. The more you can feel this as a present, centered experience of your life. Let that go. Take a deep breath and gently allow your eyes to open. And so I'm going to give you another practice. What I'd like you to do is, let me explain the caveat first. Human beings on average spend between 75 and 80% of their day complaining. I don't know what's funny about that, but it's true. But that's what the research suggests. And that's because of the tremendous negativity bias that our brain has. I do some of these kind of practices with people at work. I mean, I work for a couple of companies that have me come in and teach their people how to be a little more happy, because the bad news and good news is that people who are happier tend to be more productive. That over time, stress wears you out, not encourages you to do your best, even though short term it's phenomenal. But what I'd like you to do, since we live in a brain world of 85% complaining, or 75%, I'd like you to turn to somebody near you and talk about what's one part of the work you do, no matter how you define that work. It could be employment, it could be volunteer, it could be cleaning your house. What's one part of the work you do that you absolutely love, and why? And I want you to talk about it with no complaining at all, which is almost impossible for human beings. My way of describing it is I think root canal is easier than this for people, because we want to complain and bitch all over the place. I'm asking you to spend a few minutes describing one part of your work in positive terms, what you love about it, and only talk about the positive part about it. Because the way most of us are is, well, at work, I love the creative part, except every 15 minutes my boss comes in and tells me to do something useful. None of that. Because if you're going to be happy, you have to create the brain pathways that recognize happy. So quieting down, opening to love, a happy pathway. Speaking with deep conviction about what you love, a happy pathway. You need to practice these. Again, if I had a whole day, but you need to practice creating environments like this at the work you do, so that people have more of their brain to bring to their job. If we just have threat-based parts of our brain and scarcity-based parts of our brain, then we'll do good work. But if we bring the meta needs to work, if we bring the abundance parts of ourselves, if we bring the desire to be kind and helpful too, we have much more real estate up here to bring to work, which is how happy people are more effective. They're hardier and they're more stress hardy. Anyway, please find somebody to have this conversation with for a few moments. Thank you. I want to just finish with just one or two thoughts about this. In the research, one of the things that really distinguishes happy from less happy people is so that it's embarrassing. I know I'm sure the NIH needed a $2 million grant for this, but happy people actually wake up in the morning and think, what can I do to have a better day? Less happy people wake up in the morning and think, I have so much crap to do. So there's the world's wisdom boiled down right there for you. But recognize again, and I will end this, that within a pyramid of needs, values, and perspective, you want to always be aware of the rising nature, the need for you to ascend that pyramid over time for the full flourishing of your humanity. The second piece is also to remember day by day moments where everything about your life is as it should be, and that you're thankful for what you have, not just acquiring what you don't. Like that's such a simple but challenging thing, to remember what you have, not just bent on acquiring what you don't have. Anyway, I thank you for your time.